Ye olde time.
Ye olde time. Like time, but older.
Ye olde Tokyo.
Ye olde Tokyo. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Atcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I'm your kaiju user, Soup.
And I'm your pretty boy detective, Renu.
This week, AT stands for Absolute Territory, because we'll be wrapping up the spring 2021 season. But before we get into that, what have you been up to?
Oh, geez. I've been in convention heck, as you well know, because I've been away.
Yeah, that's the last month. Renu has been sparse.
Yeah, I literally this month and next month have a convention every 2 weeks.
Oh my god,
so,
that's a lot.
Yes, it's a lot. I'm pretty tired, but we're almost there. We got one more month, and then we'll be done-ish. And then I think I have like one more convention in November, and then that'll be it for the whole year. So. Yeah. Woo! But yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. It's been like a really nice return back to conventions in general, and you can kind of tell like people are like, whoa, what is this thing called socialization in person again?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's just kind of like funny to see people in crowds again, because that's just not been a thing for so long. But yeah, no, people were pretty safe, all things considered. I think all of the vendors were properly vaccinated, and we had like hand sanitizer and wipes and everything for people to stay clean.
I mean,
yeah,
it's a great time to cosplay a character that wears a face mask. I just gotta say that, you know?
There were a lot of cosplayers who went out of their way to wear face masks with their cosplays, so I really appreciated that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that conventions are opening up still, but I guess I shouldn't be considering that, like, even though we got, you know, a new, very more infectious version of the coronavirus, I don't know. It kind of seems like the government's sort of given up on that old boat.
Yeah, it's just kind of like at the very least, it's been only. Well, I wouldn't say only. Mostly Texas conventions that have opened up, and they were the first ones to open back
imagine.
up.
Yeah.
So, you know
somehow
where that is.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, you know why that would be.
Yeah.
So, I think for the most part, a lot of the larger conventions aren't opening until next year. So
yeah. I mean, I would definitely play it safe. I wouldn't be going to a convention anytime soon, but
just be safe, y'all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, it was great, and the people were so super nice.
That's good.
Yeah, I think everyone was like, "Oh wow, this is like we haven't done this in such a long time. We get to appreciate art in person, and you know, talk to artists again." And that was really refreshing. Yeah. Aside from that, I had to struggle with my printer deciding that it was not going to print properly, and I don't know. I think the problem is that because we had a whole year without conventions, all of my paper was sitting there unused, and so during that time, it was soaking up humidity. And I didn't realize this, you know? I didn't even think about it. And so by the time that I started printing, my printer head was like leaving blotches of ink, like just like strokes of ink across the paper. And I didn't understand why. And apparently, the most common reason for this is that the paper is buckled. And I didn't, and when you look at it, it doesn't look like it, right? But once I put it on a super flat surface like my drafting table, I could see parts of it were just very slightly raised, and I guess that was enough for the printer head to like accidentally strike it when it's not supposed to.
That's wild. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Texas got humid.
Oh no,
At
it's
all.
super humid here. Yeah, in
Oh,
South
gross.
Texas. Yeah, it's extremely humid. Yeah. So yeah, I should have realized it, but I guess I've never had to account for that before, because we had a convention so often that never became a problem. I was always using up my paper.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge pain that I have to now flatten all of my existing paper and then also order new paper for to be ready for all these conventions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I might just end up upgrading my printer at this point because it's still a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Printers exist. They are truly the most vindictive of technologies.
They sure are, because I always run into the problems like right before a convention.
Of course. It would never happen any other time. That would be silly.
No.
Why would that? Why would good things happen?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I've been up to.
Cool.
How about you?
I have been up to I'm trying to think about what transpired since the last time we spoke on the podcast. Yeah, like kind of a lot, but also not really. Like I've been hanging out with my friends a lot. And one of them moved to Denmark. Really, I don't know. A lot of it is just like not super interesting. It's just like I got to see my friends for the first time in a long time. Yeah, I was gonna say yesterday. It was not yesterday. 2 days ago, I went to a D&D session for a group I had not been playing for like a year, because they were having their like finale, and the DM was like, "Hey, do you want to like come for the finale?" And I was like, sure, cool. Wow. It is. You did message me the day before it appears to be taking place, which is that's certainly something. But like, yeah, I mean that's fine. I had a great time actually. I did have to get up pretty early because it was like an all-day affair. But I got to see some friends that I hadn't seen since like before the pandemic started, and I dropped out of that campaign like maybe like a month before the sort of pandemic stuff started, because I was just kind of like way too busy with everything going on. And then like a month later, I wasn't so busy, really, realistically speaking, but no one could go see each other anymore. So, you know, so that's kind of how it is. That was super fun though.
Good.
Yeah, I liked getting to see some friends I hadn't seen in a while, especially because I did feel bad about having to drop out of that campaign. Because it was obviously it was a good time, but like I just didn't really have the time to commit. I had so much other stuff going on. But yeah, that was cool. If I find some more time, kind of in my back pocket, I might try to make some other sessions. They do a lot of like online sessions now, because one of my friends is moving to Denver. So you know, it's kind of we're at that weird point in our lives where people start to like do adult things, like move for like reasons, right? And to other places that are not where you were born and grew up. So it's been kind of wild, I gotta say. But yeah, I might try to make some more of those sessions. We have been having trouble with our session scheduling for multiple reasons. Obviously, part of it is that you have a convention every 2 weeks for the next like month or so, and have had for the last month or so. But obviously, you know, a big part of it is also like my schedule has been kind of in flux recently. I've been trying to make some more things work, but yeah, hopefully things settle down a little bit, or at least we can begin to kind of rein them in.
Yeah, I'm really hoping we'll be able to get back into it once.
Yeah.
Scheduling
is very difficult.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the most annoying things.
Yeah, definitely.
When it comes to
anything.
playing Dungeons and Dragons. Well, yeah, I guess anything, but like specifically like D&D because it's like a weekly thing. It's like you have to find a time that works every week for everybody.
Yeah, it gets more complicated the more people who are involved. And so
right.
on.
Yeah, that's why it's nice to have like the day when like to have a day already and a time where like you should be free. Obviously, a lot of times you don't really get that much of a choice in the matter, but Anyway, yeah, I really have not been up to anything overly that much more interesting. I gotta say, like, it's just kind of been slowly easing back into a social life with the people that live here. Obviously, very slowly, very cautiously, everybody is vaccinated. We try to spend time indoors rather than going out because, like, we are all vaccinated and it's very effective. Obviously, everybody should get vaccinated if possible. But even if it's not 100% effective, right? Like it's very highly effective. Don't get me wrong, but there's still like a chance, right? And the variant that's going around now is more infectious than any of the other ones that we have had, and like the case number in the United States is like climbing again, which is not super good. And even if you are vaccinated, you might pass it on to somebody who isn't. And like, I'm okay staying inside for a little bit longer, I think, generally speaking. As much as possible, of course.
I think
right?
Yeah, definitely people should still remain cautious. Like, don't necessarily let your guard down completely, and make sure you carry on your good hygienic sanitary practices, because that's gonna serve you for like the rest of your life if you are washing your hands regularly and being conscientious of when you touch door handles or other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like I obviously I don't mean to make this sound like it's like a personal responsibility thing, right? Because at the end of the day, right, it is the government's choice to open things back up again, and I understand it's not as simple as just maybe we should keep things closed a little longer, but really, like, we've just it's been kind of like a year and change of just constantly dropping the ball all the time. So like, it is a choice to open things back up again despite a more infectious version of the thing that kept us inside for a year and change, like, being there. So it's not people's fault necessarily. It's like a structural problem with how we handle this kind of thing. As soon as it's safe enough, probably it's just kind of whatever, go for it.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like, this wouldn't have gotten so bad if there had been a proper infrastructure in the first place to deal with this kind of problem.
Right.
And if there had been a proper response from the beginning versus letting the problem get out of hand and then trying to treat it, right?
Yeah, like if we had not dissolved an entire like office to prevent pandemics, maybe this wouldn't be as bad as it is now. But like we're eating those consequences now, and like we should still continue to consider and deal with those rather than closing our eyes and going, whatever, we did our part.
Right, we moved past it. Good job, everyone.
It's like it's not over.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely continue doing your research, staying informed, and trying to make the best decisions you can for yourself and your loved ones.
Sure. And it's like, obviously a large part of this also is just, a lot of people just don't really have much of a choice in the matter. A lot of the cases are obviously people who are unvaccinated for one reason or another. And, it's kind of sad because like coming out of, and I say coming out of, right? Choosing to decide that this is the end of the pandemic when it's not really, obviously, is kind of sad because we're just like, I think the people will remember, but the structures will obviously not, as soon as they are able to kind of put it behind them and ignore them. Where like there were a lot of things that came out of the pandemic that were like pretty good, right? Like the fact that a lot of jobs became remote is pretty good. I would say that's a pretty good thing, generally speaking. It really gives a lot of accessibility to people who, you know, don't have the mobility, don't have the transportation, and sometimes don't have the money to like live anywhere near where a job is, right?
Yeah.
I liked getting to see places where the seating was largely outside and part of like the outside world and part of the streets, and they would close that area off to cars, and like you could just walk around, and it was like living in a place where you were allowed to live, right? Like that's ultimately the thing, which is like despite the fact that the pandemic was a large part of the reason we couldn't go outside, I feel like we learned a lot about integrating our world, or remembering that we can integrate our world in a way that is not just meant for maximum efficiency and for cars, right? Like making a city that people can live in. Which is
Yeah. I guess like a little
yeah.
silver lining amongst all of the
Yeah, I mean
devastation.
there are a lot of silver linings. Like a lot of people like have come to the realization collectively because of the pandemic and the working conditions that they're not really willing to work for $7 an hour anymore. When companies just continually throw you under the bus, there is a labor shortage because one, a lot of labor has fucking died, right?
Mhm.
That sucks. But like also
Absolutely horrifying.
because but also because like people realize like I'm getting treated like absolute garbage for nothing pay. I'm not gonna live either way. I might as well just not like do
Right.
this
I shouldn't
terrible work,
risk my
right?
life for this nothing job.
Yeah, like if I can't
Mhm.
afford to pay rent and eat food, like doing this very dangerous thing, provably very dangerous, like what is the point in attempting to do that anymore, right? Like if you have a problem with not being able to get people on your workforce, maybe that's a problem with you and not with them, right? It's not a
Exactly.
it's
And
not
like
a
for
we have no work ethic problem. It's like a pay us.
right, and the fact that there are people out there who are earning more through unemployment than through their actual jobs is
Right,
crazy.
exactly.
So it's like
Yeah.
why would I want to risk my well-being at this job that pays me less than if I were to try and get unemployment from the government?
Yeah, and it's like so frustrating because a lot of people take that to be like, well, you see, the government's giving too many handouts. Like, this is how people
Mhm.
get lazy. And it's like, no, you're just criminally underpaying people and they realize,
Yeah.
like, they deserve better,
Right.
right? Like, I, uh, you spend a couple months at home and suddenly you realize, hey, it kind of blows when I'm like not in my house 24/7, right? Like there was that thing recently where the Frito-Lay like workers struck for like 3 weeks so that they wouldn't have to work 12-hour shifts 7 days a week anymore. And
Oh
now
my
they can only be
god.
forced to work 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, which
Oh
is
my god.
like that's
Even
just awful.
even pharmacists don't work like those kinds of hours, and I feel like there are doctors who do, but that's because they're literally saving lives, you know?
Right.
Like they'll have like several they'll have many 12-hour shifts on, and then they'll have like a couple weeks or a month off, you know? That's
Yeah.
it's just
Like
humane, I guess.
ultimately the thing is like, a lot of people kind of bring up the argument that if you raise the minimum wage, a lot of small businesses will go under, but that just means that your small business probably shouldn't have existed, right? Like if you can only get by and I understand that like, oftentimes margins, especially for small businesses like restaurants are razor thin, right? Like
Yeah.
don't get me wrong about that. I think that that is kind of another issue to tackle in and of itself, but like if you cannot afford to keep your business running unless what you're doing is exploiting people's labor, then
Mhm.
maybe that business just isn't correct, right? Like
I mean, it's being
maybe there's
unethical at the
another
very
problem
least.
there, right? Yeah, like the thing is that it's like saying like, well, like what about the small businesses Like you'll run all the small businesses out of business, and it's like, well, I mean, that's not our fault for not wanting to work for peanuts. That's like big businesses' fault for like everything that they do to discourage and like poach small businesses and like force them out of areas, right? Like it's not the workers' fault that you can't keep up with a Walmart, right? That's Walmart's fault for being predatory.
Yeah.
And it's just very frustrating because it's like trying to explain that people say, well, you're trying to steal my livelihood. You're not paying someone enough to live. You're stealing their livelihood. I don't know what to say. I sincerely wish that we come out of the other end of this, whenever we truly do come out of it, a sort of more willing to be kind to people sort of society.
Yeah,
I hope.
That is the most optimistic and idealistic, I guess, hope that we can have for just like the future in general. But
right. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of criminally underpaid.
Yeah,
people,
all right. Yeah, you want to talk about anime? This was
let's get into anime.
Ridiculous season. There was so much anime this season, and also like we had a bunch of like scheduling conflicts anyway, and so we couldn't finish a lot of stuff, and there was already a lot of stuff to watch. Like I tried to catch up on my own, and I just couldn't find the time to watch all this anime. Like,
I know.
Here's the thing.
We tried to divide and conquer, and we couldn't get it all.
I can confidently say there's too much anime being made when I cannot keep up with the season. I'm not even like gainfully employed in like any meaningful way, right? Like I work on my own schedule and I still could not find time to watch all this crap. Like there's too much anime being made.
Yeah.
Listen, this was an amazing season for anime. There was so much really, really good stuff that came out. But slow your roll. Oh my god.
I would be fine if they spaced it out a bit more.
Yeah, like I kind of missed the pace when there was like 2 or 3 like really good shows a season instead of like 8.
Oh yeah,
like,
me too. Yeah.
This isn't sustainable for workers. It's not even sustainable for me, the consumer.
Yeah,
like I can't keep up with all this crap.
Yes.
Anyway, complaints about the about that aside, let's complain about the anime industry some more by talking about Studio Mappa's Zombieland Saga Revenge, which is the second season of Zombieland Saga. I liked this season a lot, but it had a lot of very clear issues.
I am in complete agreement with that opinion.
Yeah, like undoubtedly it was, very much a highlight of my week to watch it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The show remains as like free-spirited and as fun as ever before.
Yes.
It is so weird. It goes all over the place. The songs just slap, right?
Like, the songs
the actual
are
music
great.
is really good. The CG got better this time.
Yes.
Which is pretty good. So like all the performances look better, and that's nice. There's just 2 episodes near the end that become like a period drama about the Bakumatsu.
That was so fun and crazy.
I love the weirdness of Zombieland Saga and how willing it is to just be just whatever it wants to be.
Yes.
But we have to acknowledge that Studio Mappa is doing like 8 million things at once. Like this was one they were doing. What was the other thing they were doing this season? They were doing another thing this season. I think it was was it Tokyo Revengers? I can't remember.
No, not Tokyo Revengers.
No, it was something else. Studio Mappa was working on something else, and they're also like working on like a Jujutsu Kaisen movie. And like, yes, the anime industry is pretty flexible. Even if something takes place at a studio, it's not a guarantee that you're gonna get like the people who actually work there working on it necessarily, right? You'll probably get like a director or something. But yeah, I would say that the general animation of Zombieland Saga Revenge suffers a lot. It looks pretty janky a lot of the time. It looks very rushed, and it's kind of really clear how overworked the staff is, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I'd say overworked, and also Just a lot of reports about Studio Mappa's organization is that there isn't really
Yeah.
much.
Right, exactly.
Is that
and
they're constantly, relocating people back and forth on projects.
yeah, and like the thing is that Mappa I'll link a video in the link dump about like charting Studio Mappa, but like Mappa is a very interesting case study in like what happens when your animation studio goes from what is essentially like a passion project by like a small team of creatives to being like a business, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the head of Mappa, who I fled there from a different studio, I don't remember which one.
From Madhouse, actually.
From Madhouse? Yeah. Okay,
because of the same reason, because it became too much of a business. Right? Yeah.
And then he left Mappa to start. God, what is he working on now? What? Do you remember? Do you remember which studio it is?
Let's see. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, me neither. But it's kind of a shame though. Mappa right now isn't known for what it used to be known for, which was like fun original creations. It's really known for fairly high quality, right? Adaptations of very popular works now, right? Like stuff like Jujutsu Kaisen and Attack on Titan, that sort of stuff. And it's kind of a shame because like I remember one of the first works I ever saw from Mappa was, I believe, the Rage of Bahamut anime, which was, like, visually speaking, a lot better than a Rage of Bahamut anime deserved to be. Because, if you know anything about the, like, original game, it's pretty, like, whatever, right? Just look at, like, the Grand Blue Fantasy adaptation for, like, how it would probably supposed to be. But, like, the Rage of Bahamut anime is so good. For no reason. It looks so good. It looks like you're watching a movie all the way through. It's, like, kind of incredible, really. Like, small aside, I really hate how the anime industry is set up. Because if every studio was set up like Kyoto Animation,
yeah,
anime would be so good.
It would be very different from the climate that we see right now.
Like, anime would just, on the whole, be better. And, like, obviously, there would still be mismanagement and tight deadlines and stuff. But, like, on the whole, it would just be so much better, right? And it's, like, kind of a shame because, like, television anime has this kind of, like, reputation for being, like, One Piece, basically, right? Especially long-running stuff. Specifically One Piece, actually, is really the greatest offender of this. It's still, like, running like it has historically been, despite the fact that it's very clear that people still really, or people have come to be accustomed to the idea of getting one cour of a series every, like, couple years, right? And that's a much, like, healthier and reasonable schedule to stick to.
Okay, so apparently Masa Maruyama was the co-founder of Madhouse, and then the founder of Mappa, and then after leaving Mappa, he founded Studio M2, which made Onihei.
Onihei was pretty cool. We didn't watch too much of it, or I don't think we were even watching anime together then.
No, we were.
Were we?
Well,
maybe
2017. Maybe.
Oh, it must have been like right around when we started watching.
I think it might have been right around when we started. We watched an episode, but I guess there was some other stuff that we were interested in that season that we didn't watch more.
Yeah. So I have very complicated feelings about Zombieland Saga because on the whole, the writing and the characters and the music and the voice acting are all like phenomenal. They're great. I'm very attached to the characters at this point. I really like seeing kind of the narrative like move around and do different things. I like there's kind of like there's a feeling of like very raw passion that comes through in the treatment of the idols, basically, which is really cool. Like, I'm not, generally speaking, a big idol fan for various reasons, but this, like I said last time we watched Zombieland Saga, Zombieland Saga is an idol anime for people who do not like idol anime normally. And it's very charming, it's very funny. Overall very good, question mark.
I think it's still, even though the animation was pretty dodgy here and there, the charm of the story still came through.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you already are invested in the characters from the first season.
Sure, I think that's the biggest thing for Zombieland Saga Season 2, which is that Zombieland Saga Season 2 is not necessarily the reason you would watch Zombieland Saga. That it's probably because you watch Zombieland Saga Season 1.
Yeah.
You know, there are some shows where the second season and onward is like really where it picks up, but I would say that like it rides a lot on the success of its predecessor, of its prequel, but it's pretty good in its own right, as long as you're kind of willing to overlook the sort of production issues, which like admittedly is not that hard. I think the important things are conveyed in a manner that is not offensive to look at, you know. Yeah. So that's how I feel about Zombieland Saga. Let's talk about. I mean, let's really just get right into it. Let's talk about To Your Eternity.
This is not a spoiler-friendly podcast.
Not a spoiler-friendly podcast. I have written only one note here, and it just says "I'm cried."
If you are someone who is like hardened by tragedy and you're coming here and being like, all right, I heard things about this anime, I'm ready to have my heart ripped out, you're probably setting your expectations a little too high. Because I would say the story tells it tells itself very well, but it does fall into like, you know what's gonna happen, right? It's predictable.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect to constantly be taken aback or shock value and all that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, exactly. But it does it has like nice pacing, it has nice characters, like it's just a really overall well done story and animation.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I can say with confidence that every single time this show makes me like want to cry, like every time the show wants to make me cry, I do cry.
Yeah, that's true. The intentions come through.
And it's just very effective at doing the kind of like character death tragedy. More effective than I think pretty much any other show I've seen. Like it's not like super often that I like see a character death and I'm just like bawling, right? But like To Your Eternity actually legitimately makes me cry, right? And I'm not like someone who cries very easily, right? And so it is definitely a novel experience for me to watch this show and to have my heart just ripped out every like arc or so. It's, I think because it spends so much time just sitting there twisting the knife, like
I think what it does really well is it does the follow through really well.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, after the tragic moment happens, you get to see the impact in all its detail, and it really that's where the feels really kick in.
You get to see all of the consequences of what happens, and then also you get to see like what the character who dies like sees as their happiness, as their afterlife, like what they really want.
Yes.
And that's definitely part of what makes it so compelling, is it has a lot of respect for the death of its characters, right? Because here's the thing about character death. A lot of series, especially in a certain sort of era, a lot of character deaths are about shock value, right? Like things
Yes.
like Madoka Magica and Attack on Titan and Game of Thrones. Death in those properties is for shock value. It is for eliciting an emotional reaction. But I would say a lot of the times it doesn't have respect for what that means. And I think To Your Eternity, where it really succeeds is it is thematically resonant, right? The fact that these characters are dying actually means something, right? It is the difference between having your character in Dungeons & Dragons, like if you were playing a Dungeons & Dragons game, it's the difference between having your character just die because a goblin crits them a little too hard and having them die because they've decided to like commit really hard to like doing something, or they've decided to give their life for something, right?
Right.
And
there's a good death and there's random death.
Well, yeah. And like the thing is that people really liked the random death in that sort of like the 2010 to like 2018 sort of era, right?
Mm-hmm.
They really liked that because they were like, it keeps you on my toes, like I never know who's gonna die, like anybody could die. And it's like, yes, anybody can die, but that doesn't make it maybe makes a show more realistic, but it doesn't really mean anything if you're not doing it for any reason, right?
Right.
Like, To Your Eternity is obsessed with providing meaning to those deaths, and that's a large part of the reason they feel so impactful and meaningful, right?
Yeah, Man, I really struggled with the last arc that we watched.
Oh no, I could tell.
Yeah, I think if you get tragedy fatigue like I do, where if something is so miserable and it just keeps going and doesn't lighten enough to like give you a break before it dunks you back down again, it's like you're drowning and you just come to a point where you just accept it and there's no tension there anymore. You just lay there and you wait. That's basically the point that I reached during To Your Eternity, and that's where I'm sitting right now, because after this most recent arc we kind of reached we met more characters aside from Grandma, who's like just the best.
Right, of course,
she's like our shred of hope, and then all of the other new characters that we met are just such a-holes. I hate them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it'll come around and be like, oh my god, well, you're gonna care about them by the end of this arc, and I'm sure I will, but...
Right. Yeah, I'm of the mind that, generally speaking, I'm curious to see where it goes from here, right?
Yeah.
Because it is continuing on into Next Core, and it's... I think the thing is that we have like very well reached the point where because obviously you reach the sort of tragedy fatigue point, right?
Yeah. I want to see where the story will go. Yeah.
I think I'm teetering on the same kind of place here, right? Like if they basically just like rehash the last three arcs again. It can start to feel like it's getting a little stale, or it's like overstaying its welcome. So I really hope they do something else with it, because obviously, like, it is very predictable. You kind of get a sense for who is going to die and when, but it's still impactful and meaningful because they give it impact and they give it meaning, and they work very hard to do that. But there is a point at which it is physically impossible to care more,
Yeah, I'm so curious as to where they'll go with this next arc, because it seems like a story that's pretty keenly aware of how its audience should be feeling at certain points. Obviously, it needs to be in order to be able to keep you invested and pull at your heartstrings and all of that. And so that's why I'm thinking, okay, well, what do you do in this kind of story where you feel like you've reached the emotional saturation point? How do you keep the story moving forward?
I think because the idea, right, at least from what I'm getting, is that it's a lot to do with like loss and grief and how to reconcile those feelings. And with sort of each arc, you know, our little Orbo gets a little bit more you know, experience with the world. Like they can speak now and like emote and like communicate to people.
I'm very invested in
right?
Orbo.
Yeah, and in little Orbo. But I'm interested because I really want them to branch out and explore some other things, right? Like it's fine to have like a piece that is like about like one thing, but also like we've done the one thing like 3 times, right? So past that point, you're really gonna have to do something quite spectacular to make me like cry again. And I think maybe you should just cut your losses and decide that you want to go in a different direction and do something cool and fun and new. And
that's what I thought that we're gonna do with this latest arc. That because he finally had someone who could fight side by side with him, I thought, okay, maybe that's the direction that they'll go to like kind of like freshen things up, you know, liven it up a bit. And then it just took the same dive, and I was like,
yeah, I think to be fair though, for that arc specifically, like, it doesn't have traction for the rest of the story otherwise, right? Because otherwise he would just stay there until like Gugu goes
yeah, and I think
dies.
that's the point they were trying to hone in on, especially when the god was talking to him. He was saying like, well, you're just gonna you won't get stronger by being here. And your enemies are going to continue getting stronger, and they'll continue coming after you. So
right,
yeah.
So far, this show has been very good.
Yeah.
On the whole, it has been very good, very engaging.
Extremely good. Yes.
I think it just feels very grounded, right? It feels like there is a lot of substance to it, as opposed to just being like party tricks, right? Like,
yes.
The reason that it makes you so emotional, and the reason why you care so much, is because they do a lot of work to build your attachment to those characters in a real way, and not in a like, you know, like a cheap party trick way where they're like, oh, well, you see like, this is like Orpho the orphan, and
I mean,
and I know that Gugu is kind of like that,
Gugu's
right?
an orphan.
But like they make you care about him for reasons other than like the sad things in his life, right? You like him.
I would argue.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, you know, there are a lot of sad things that happen in his life. But like generally speaking, I think that like it's just the feeling of having there more to be a character than for them to die, right? Like,
yeah.
They're not characters written just to die necessarily, right? They're characters that actually feel like they matter in some way. And the fact that we get that through Fushi's like perspective is it works. And I really do want to know where it goes next, because like I might think much less favorably of it by the end of the coming core, but like,
we'll see.
Who's to say? Like I just don't know where it's going quite yet. So that's where I'm at with Tear Eternity. Like, I think it's really good, right? It's not groundbreaking, but it's such a well told story. And a lot of care has been taken into the way it is told. As evidenced by the kind of like emotional attachment you get, right?
Yeah, I think if you're curious about it and you just kind of want to see what it's about, definitely at least check out the first episode, because that episode will inform you a lot about how the rest of the show will.
Yeah. You get the picture of how the rest of the show will be from the first episode.
Yeah, but the first episode is brilliant. It is really,
it's
really
so
well
good.
done.
Yeah. It
is like iron tight.
it is, right? And it doesn't the thing is that while you're watching it, it doesn't necessarily feel that way, but after the fact you realize like,
yes.
oh wow, yeah.
Yes.
Because like the first episode really effectively engages and builds you into this story in a way where like you know exactly what will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
The boy dies at the end of the episode. But when it happens, you're like, oh no. I am crying. So yeah. To Your Eternity is really good. Just generally speaking, a really great anime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we talk about Shadow's House?
Sure.
So you didn't finish this, but you were pretty close to the end. You got to where the twist was, where they like, I wouldn't even say it's a twist, but like where they reveal what the actual setup of the show is.
Yeah, no, that was crazy. They suddenly were like exposition dump, and I was like, yo, I need to like rewind and
Do you know
rewatch all of that.
I think the funniest thing is that I had to leave halfway through watching this episode the first time, and I didn't pick it up until like today. So like I watched half of that episode, and then I tuned it back into the episode like a couple weeks later, and literally the second I do, they start expositioning. I'm like, oh my god, what?
They laid down some groundbreaking stuff very casually, and I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, Shadow's House is fucking wild. It's, I would say, generally speaking, it is a very, like, it's a very slowly paced show, and I don't mean that in a necessarily like a derogatory way.
No, it's very deliberately paced, I feel like.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of it feels kind of slice of lifey, but like there's this sense that the flow of it feels like a gradually kind of growing tension.
Yes, I love that.
And I think it does that fairly well. I think this is a successful work in how that works. I enjoyed watching it all the way through and learning about all the weird shit, and then like it's very clearly like, you know, it cuts off at a point that, you know, is a decent ending point for a season, but there's clearly a lot more to the story. So I'm interested to see if it gets a second season, because I think it was pretty good.
I think
overall.
what I've watched of it has been really good too.
Yeah, and I'm well enough invested that I like do want to watch more of it. Like I want there
definitely
to be more of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if not, then there's always the manga, but I think
sure.
I just love the way that the story unfolds. In terms of the world building, the mysteries behind that. Every time you get an answer to a question, there's still 5 more waiting in the wings, you know?
Right.
And also it's at the same time building your investment in these characters. The dolls, specifically the children, you know.
Right.
And so you're building your investment in them, but they're also building their investment in each other. They're forming bonds with each other, which I think is also a great way to propel the story forward. Because now it's suddenly a lot more meaningful when one of them, you know, dies.
yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it. I really want to see more of the story. So hopefully they'll make an anime. If not, then I'll have to read the manga.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I don't really have a lot more to say on it, honestly. Like it's it has a very cool premise, and it executes that premise very well.
Yep.
A good watch overall, especially if you're into kind of like weird, cool world building, and you want to watch this show about like shadow people and the human faces that they
it's quite different from
with
the other anime in this season in that way.
It
builds its own unique world.
All right, let's talk about probably I would arguably say probably the best thing that came out this season, Odd Taxi.
It was such a like an unexpected hit with us.
I really like Odd Taxi for like a lot of reasons. First of all, like I like the art style of it a lot. All of the little animal people are very charming. But then you get the twist at the end where it turns out that they're not animal people. That's just the way that Odokawa, the main character, sees them because of his like traumatic backstory, and that's fucking wild.
I like that you just come out with it. Like, we haven't even started discussing the show yet.
Yeah, like the thing is that obviously, like, we just spoiled the ending of Odd Taxi, and it's a very like, whoa, what the fuck kind of like twist. You're like, whoa, that's wild. But also, there is a lot more to this story than just like the twist, right? Again, it's a show that has a lot of substance and isn't just a party trick.
Yeah.
And it's very cool.
Say, about the twist, that the only hint that I noticed about it was the one that we were all freaking out about, which was the landlady, the dog landlady having a pet dog, and we were all like, "What is that? what do you mean?" You had this carefully like set up animal world, and then this animal dog lady has a dog, and then we were all completely confused until the very end when the twist was revealed. It's like, oh, she's just a landlady with a dog. She's a human landlady with a dog.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I really enjoyed Odd Taxi because it is basically a story. It's exactly the kind of story I like, where it is about a set of characters that are incidentally related to each other, and it keeps expanding on how those relations are like what shape that takes and what that means for everybody else. And like there's a lot of, it's a very like dense show. There's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of stuff that gets reincorporated or brought back up later.
It's super surprisingly dense, and there's so many threads like overlapped and connected on each other that you wouldn't really expect it because the show has such a slow pace.
Right.
But I think that that's what allows it to have such a dense story is generally with these kinds of stories where there's like a huge cast and you're flipping back and forth between all their different stories and perspectives, it gets overwhelming and confusing. You don't remember people's names. You don't remember who has what backstory, but because it takes its time with having these little moments with these characters and having them just banter, you remember, okay, Walrus Guy is like, he's the chill main character he just wants to do his job as a taxi cab driver. And then there's the monkey guy who gets into some sketchy business over trying to make himself look much bigger than he is, and then so on and so forth. So I really like the way that it has such a slow pace for such a dense story.
Yeah, and it also helps that because of the premise of it, where they're all animal people, it's much easier to remember who's
absolutely
who.
Yes.
Like the visual style of it really helps the show, and like the fact that you actually get to see what all of the people look like as humans is very fun.
Oh, I loved it.
But also, what I really enjoyed about it is Odd Taxi is such a like mature story in the very truest sense of the word, right? A lot of people kind of like think about maturity as like, well, there's like blood and violence and stuff, like sex and stuff, but like this to me is what a mature story is like. It is a story about like human relationships, like in a very like pretty mundane world, but about the very real kind of drama that happens. And obviously there's some like very exciting things that happen, right? Like there's people going around shooting guns and doing
there's
gang
tons of like
activities
wild coincidences that happen, but you just go with it because the story itself is is like it. Sometimes it's so extremely mundane, but then suddenly,
Sure. You know what? Actually, it feels in that respect, it feels a lot like Tokyo Godfathers. There's a lot of like little things that happen coincidentally that come back later, and it makes it's all very cohesive. It works really well. It's very well written. It's very smartly written. Like it is. This is a smart show.
Yes.
But it's also like it's also kind of just a show about people talking.
Yes.
Largely, it's just a lot of people talking to each other in a taxi cab, and it is a very effective show to be able to have that be the sort of lion's share of it, and have it not be boring visually or dialogue wise. Like it's very slow, it's very deliberate, but it's also like very well written. It's just done in such a way that like there is both the kind of micro aspect of these people having conversations with each other, and they're very like realistic conversations. They feel like people conversing, like people talking about like, you know, their jobs and stuff, and like wanting to be internet famous or whatever, right? Like talking about like social media and all this stuff. And you get all of this from the perspective of a taxi cab driver who incidentally meets a lot of people, who isn't very interested in the world of people, right? Which is the perfect kind of character to see this kind of story from, and to see like how all of these connections are made, even though he's not that interested in like making connections with people in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Like, everything about the way that Odd Taxi is put together is like just so perfect. It just fits together so perfectly. It's like definitely the most like satisfying thing that I've watched this season for sure. Like hands down.
It's just so well done, you know.
Yeah.
You could tell that they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew what kind of story they wanted to tell, and they told it consistently from beginning to end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's never a moment where it feels like what's happening is like pointless, right?
Yeah.
There's always a reason that something is happening, or you're getting to see something. Like it's told very effectively. That they just kind of like give you the like ending where it's just like, oh
my god, oh my god.
Like when you get to the end and you solve when you solve the mystery of what happened, you're like,
oh my god, the ending. The ending is like so. I don't want to like spoil that part, because I think that part is like its own reward. But I would have thought that the entire story would have been a neat wrap up, and I think it still could be.
I think it still is,
and I think it still very much is, because you can kind of imagine ish where the story might go from here, except not.
I think I think the story reaches its thematic conclusion, and like it gives you that last like little psych out, but I think generally speaking, it's done at that point.
I think if it wanted to continue on to a season 2, I mean, it very well could, but I think it would have to approach it from a different angle, you know, because it is so strongly hinged on the story that it told through Odokawa, and then that story is essentially finished because that arc for him is done. So maybe he has another one, I don't know, but at least that part of it is done.
Yeah, I like Odd Taxi so much because it's like an original work. It's just all like it all just fits very well together. It's like this is really like what I want, right? I want like cool, weird original animation. Obviously it is very cool to see the things that I liked reading in manga be animated into anime. I also really dislike original anime. Like it's kind of sad because like I don't remember if you've ever seen Punchline, which was
I don't know.
It's an older Studio Mappa work from when they were kind of doing a lot of like weird original stuff. And it's it's like right proper weird, but I also think it's really, really good. And it's kind of a shame, because it feels like really good original works are so few and far between in anime. Like there's a lot of good stuff that comes out. A lot of it's based on stuff that has proven to be good and successful. Would you like to tell us about Bakuten?
Bakuten! It's the rhythmic gymnastics anime, and I would say the first 3 episodes are so heckin' solid. The animation is really, really good with, like, what I liked about it is not necessarily just the big animation, but the really subtle animation is so good. Like when he's hanging out of a window, or when he is, as a beginner, trying to do a backflip for the first time, and you can kind of see a little wobble and the little stumble is like so perfect. I rewatched that part like a couple of times just to analyze the animation because it was so good. And then story-wise, it kind of meanders in the middle, which disappointed me because the pacing and story in the beginning was so well done. And it even had like very weird filler. Like in the middle, for some reason they just decide that they're gonna have like a little very cliche like haunted school episode where they're in school after hours and they are creeped out by the thought that there's like a ghost roaming the halls, and it's kind of like a fear challenge almost, where they're trying to play hide and seek with their senpai, and then they're slowly getting picked off one by one by the quote-unquote ghost, but then by the end it's like a security guard. But then at the end it's like, ooh, was it a security guard or was it really a ghost? In our rhythmic gymnastics anime.
Yeah.
And the only way that they tied it all back was like at the like for like a statement at the end. You get the main character saying, "Wow, I really want to fly as a gymnast." And I mean, he essentially says something to that effect, and that was how they tied it all back in. I was really frustrated because the entire episode felt like a waste of time, and it felt like an anime that kind of started off knowing where it was going and then fell off, and just kind of like had to pick up the pieces, and then at the end they pulled it together so that they ended up qualifying. They won their they had a high scoring performance and they were able to qualify for essentially like the next round of like I guess the inter high, and then that's where they left off the story. So I mean it is an original anime, and so because it started off strong and it kind of ended pretty well, I'm hoping that they'll make more, but if they do, then I'm hoping that they'll be able to iron out the production and actually tell a consistent story, because they really, I felt like, dropped the ball in the middle. Yeah.
Nice. Interesting.
Yeah,
well,
but, yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, I would say in terms of sports anime, it's less of like what we don't necessarily like in sports anime. Like it's not as shonen as other sports anime at all, actually. It's a much softer sports anime, so definitely not like as dramatic or soft as like Soft Tennis Boys. But
oh god, Soft Tennis Boys! I completely forgot. That was a lot.
Yeah, but it is still like it is within that vein of type of sports anime where it's not necessarily about like I gotta use my superpower sports anime move to like win the match. You know, it's nothing like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting. I would like to talk about SSSS.Dynazenon.
Please do. I'm very curious.
So it is another anime set in the Gridman universe.
Yes.
by Studio Trigger, and I have to say, uh, it's really good. Like, it's
Okay.
really good.
Good.
It has a lot of things that I really like.
Okay.
Kind of all mushed together, right? Like, obviously, like, we watched the first episode, and there was stuff going on. And we're like, woo, yeah. From episode 2 onward, it's just like it's like really, really good.
Okay.
The directing of the show is just excellent, right? Like the pacing of it, there's a lot of time gags where like we will just stare at like characters staring at each other for like enough time to make you wonder if the show is paused, and then they'll start talking. You're like, oh, okay. But it actually reminds me a lot of what I liked about One Drag Priority, where the people speaking to each other, like the characters when they speak to each other, feels very grounded and real. Like they're so, like oftentimes they have people speaking to each other over like a lot of background noise happening. There's people speaking to each other over each other, which I think is funny. It gives it gives it a very like Dynazenon pays a lot of attention to very specific details. It's very thorough. And I would say that the animation on the whole, like the moment to moment of anything that's not like mech fighting it's all right. It's not bad, it's not amazing. It feels a lot more limited than a lot of the other stuff Studio Trigger does. But I would say that it also doesn't look bad. Like I think it knew how much it needed to be. Is I guess a way of putting it. Like it doesn't try to be more than it is. And it does a lot with a little.
Okay.
So a lot of the kind of in between moments are animated in a way where we're getting like far shots, so they're not like super detailed, or like a lot of shots where like there's not a lot of animation going on, but those moments are carried a lot by the sharp directing, how good the dialogue is, like the goofs are very funny. Like when they make jokes, it's pretty funny. And all of that stuff is really good.
Okay.
There is also the stuff that is really great. So I love the mech CG fights in Dynazenon. They are so good. Like they look better than the ones in Gridman. Absolutely. They have gotten a bump in their CG department
Good.
or their proficiency because like delicious. Like I mean it's like tokusatsu goodness, right? Like it's like giant people piloting a Megazord like fighting giant monsters. But what I did notice, and like obviously all that stuff looks really great. It's super hype when they fight. They play the like music, and some of it's like really like intense. So like Dynazenon.
That's awesome.
But there's so that's really great. That would be good no matter what the content of the show was. But all of the little in between stuff also feels very good because there's a lot of I feel like it's very effective about having this character drama that's happening in the really in the forefront of the show, with like the giant mech kaiju battles being like the backdrop of like learning to live with loss and grief and like overcoming your baggage by connecting with other people, and like the thought that the connections that we make with other people might be affecting our freedom, right? Like there's a very interesting sort of line, a through line where the kaiju are they feed off of emotions, and they come from the human heart, right? And in many ways, they are a kind of very like individual freedom for people, like to be free from the constraints of society and time and space. But also like the sort of point of it, and the reason why they are like in Dynazenon, it's one of those like combining mechs. It's about how like people connect to each other, how those may be restrictions on our freedom, but they're also kind of things that give our lives meaning, and like the bonds we make with people are important in other ways. And I love that it's just it's like four and a bit broken people trying to pilot a mech together. There's a lot of like baggage that each character has that they overcome kind of in the sort of like emotional climax of the show. Like it's like some of the characters are dealing with some things and some of them are dealing with others, but all of them have like trauma from their past that they're trying to overcome, and the connections that they make through piloting the Dynazenon are a large part of the reason they're able to overcome those things. And I am not joking when I say that episode 10 of SSSS.Dynazenon is the coolest episode of an anime I've seen, like, God, in ages. Like, I don't even remember, like, a cooler scene. Like, it's a very cool episode, very well directed. It's clear that the sort of, like, head animator is like, different. It has a very different visual style from the rest of the anime, but it's really good, and it concerns the characters essentially being erased from time and space, being absorbed by a kaiju, and like literally they're just speaking to each other, and then like a character will like vanish, and it feels like they were like edit vanished, like there's a cut there, like you get King Crimson, and it's a very cool, very jarring effect.
Yeah.
But then they like bring it around, and the main character Yomogi is like looking into the pasts of all of the other, you know, Dynazenon pilots, and is trying to help them move forward. And it's like, I can't overstate how cool the episode is. Like, you know that one episode in Gridman where he like wanders into the train and like all the weird stuff is like happening. It feels a lot like that, where it feels so suddenly jarring and out of place, but at the same time it feels like cohesive and like it works. I cannot overstate how cool this episode is and how well it works for what it's doing as like the sort of emotional climax of the entire show. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that sounds cool.
I loved Dynazenon, and honestly, if they continue to do like Gridman stuff, I will continue watching it. Like this fucking slaps. It just rips. I don't know. I don't know how else to say this. It's really good, and I highly recommend you watch it.
Okay, I was gonna ask that because you know how much I really couldn't stand the male and female leads in episode 1.
Yeah. I'll say that they definitely it's a lot more bearable going forward, especially as soon as when you start digging into the other characters.
Okay, that's what I'm hoping for. Because I was like, if they were just side characters, it would be one thing, but they're the main, like, forefront, you know, people.
And, like, okay, so there is there are some things that I like about it, where it kind of has the okay, so like one, it kind of has that thing where like the main like two characters are like attracted to each other, kind of. Like, it's like a romance subplot. But they never answer the question of like of whether, right? Like
So I can
And
pretend they're not together.
And I think that's fine, right? But I think that the like, so the girl whose name is Minami, I think honestly her arc was more compelling than I thought it would be. Because after the first episode, you get left with a very bad impression. You're like, oh, I like the dude much better, right? Like he's a bro. But I think
I do like
makes,
the bro much better.
it makes a lot of sense by the end, and I think it works very well.
Okay, that's what I thought that her arc would kind of lead up to, is that, I mean, obviously they would have a logical explanation as to why she would behave the way that she does.
Right, and it does make sense. And I do think it's good, and I think that it's a very effective way of conveying a lot of the uncertainties we kind of have around life and death. Overall, like, I would say that it turned out a lot better than I thought it would be. I think really the only character that like kind of suffers is the main character Yomogi. Like he's still kind of a nothing character by the end, but like but I would say that not in a way that like is like super egregious. Like there is some like they like touch on what his like kind of issues are, and then they immediately like blow past it because like the rest of the characters are more important, and that's completely okay to me, honestly. I don't actually care that much.
I mean, I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, like overall, like pretty good. Like Dynazenon was like delicious, very good. If they make more Gridman stuff, I will continue to watch it 100%, hands down.
I like that.
No questions asked. All right.
Okay. I guess next we can talk about Nomad, Megalo Box 2, which I watched. And my goodness, it's a sequel to season 1, but it is such a hugely different like season. Like it almost feels like a different show, except all of the it's all the same characters and animation, but the way they tell the story is from a completely different angle, and that's why it's a bit difficult for me to say that if you enjoyed season 1 you would enjoy season 2. I think if you like season 1, then you should check out season 2 and see if you might want to see where the characters go, and if you like the way that they went with it. But similar to how we mentioned that Odd Taxi is a very mature story, season 2 is a way more mature story than season 1. And that's why people who are in it for like the fighty, the Joe wins at the end, season 1 feels, you might be be left questioning why season 2 is the way that it is. It follows the perspectives of different characters, different boxers. And Joe isn't in the forefront of the story until much later on. And what's interesting is that it's because season 1 was so full of fights, you kind of expect that out of season 2, but season 2 has significantly less boxing for a boxing anime. And it's far more about the character stories and the character drama, and I think it's so interesting that it's still a show where you don't really know a whole lot about the character's history. Like, you still don't know what happened to Junk Dog in the past. You just know that right now he's Joe, and the only stuff that you know about him is the stuff that you learned about him in season 1. But they still managed to tell a really compelling character drama for him and his relationships with the other characters from season 1, and how they have essentially grown apart in season 2 due to his own actions. And I'd say like the differences between the 2 seasons can be pretty aptly illustrated by the endings of the episodes. So in season 1, they ended they always ended with like a really hype, like not dead yet, and then you're like, yeah, let's go watch the next episode, see how he comes back, and then they have the hype ending song, and it was really good. Each episode in season 2 ends with Hasta ver la luz, which means until I see the light, and it has like a kind of like a slow, soft Spanish guitar song at the end. And the entire through line of the show involves this kind of like a bedtime story that gets told about the tale of the hummingbird and the nomad, and you get to see representations of them in the story. Like the nomad is, our boy Joe, and then there's a hummingbird character, quote unquote, and then there's other representations of the characters in the stories, and it's essentially wrapping around to the point that this entire season isn't about like scoring victories or leaving your mark as a legend. It's about once you've accomplished your dreams, evaluating what's actually important to you. Is it still chasing those dreams? Is it making more dreams, or is it like the people around you who helped you accomplish those dreams? And so the show gives like really finite answers for each of these characters to those kinds of questions. And I think that's really cool. For a while, I didn't quite know how to feel about it because it was so different from season 1, but I think by the end, the way that they ended up wrapping up everything, the story was told really consistently. The animation was very good. Even though there were fewer fights, the fights that they did show were super well done. And you kind of understood exactly what they were going for with the results of each fight. So definitely don't expect like a hype, like Rocky, I don't know, like 2, 3, however many movies that he had. Drawn out kind of like boxing legend type of deal. This is basically like an emotional drama exploration and wrap up to the whole Megalo Box story. That's how it felt like. Yep.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I think like if you ended up wanting to watch it, I would recommend it because it might be you might like it. Just expect that it's different from the first season. That's all.
Cool. I want to talk about 86. The 86. So this show was very good, actually. And it was good all the way through, actually, which was pretty cool.
Nice.
So the premise of 86 is that there is a kingdom that is fighting a war against autonomous machines. They're essentially fighting a war against a neighboring kingdom that doesn't exist anymore because they made autonomous killing robots for war, and then the autonomous war robots killed them because of course, right? So they're fighting a war against that dead kingdom, and they're like, well,
wow,
it's fine. We invented our own autonomous fighting robots. They are not autonomous fighting robots. They are, in fact, people. People are piloting those robots, and they just lie to the public about it. So, cool. And essentially they're like, well, basically in 2 years, the robots will run out of power and we will not have to fight them anymore. Except that is not true because the autonomous fighting robots from the neighboring kingdom that are actually autonomous have figured out that they can harvest human brains and use those to make new units. And those units don't die. So,
oh, jeez.
So basically, it is this horrific, like, this horrific picture of a self-replicating robot army, right? But all the premise aside, it's a war story, right? It's a story about war, what it means to be doing war, the human cost of war, and also what it means to be at war when you are not recognized by your country, right? So the twist that happens is essentially And I don't remember if this is a twist or not, or if they just tell you, but like all of the citizens in this kingdom are have like silver hair and like gray eyes or whatever, or like blue eyes or whatever. Everybody's like that, and then everybody who wasn't like that was essentially sent to internment camps, right? So like, all right, so it already comes at the gate with this very loaded like
oh my God.
parallel, right? Like, Japan makes a piece of media about what would happen if a country decided to intern people on racial lines. Okay. Right? And I think it's pretty good, pretty effective at doing that, because there is a lot of, as you would expect, like moral grappling with that, right? They really put the main character, who is like the I get she's like a noble or something from like a noble family. They really put her through the ringer, because like she basically gets to hear all of the stuff that like no one else will tell her from her. So she's a handler, so she handles the robots, quote unquote, and they speak to her because she is attempting to see them as more than just autonomous fighting robots, right?
Right.
But it is very clear that she is still perpetuating the corrupt systems. There's nothing that she can do on an individual level to actually fix the system that is broken, right? And I like that there's a lot of moments where she means well, but is still a part of that system. So like,
right.
there's a moment where one of them dies, right? And she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Like, I'm so sorry." And like one of the characters just fucking goes off.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
he's just like what would you even know? You didn't even ask us for our real names. You only know us by our code names. And then she has a very moral dilemma about that. Right? So there's all of that stuff, right? All of the kind of like like racism and classism, and like what can an individual do to fight the society, and like what does it mean to fight for a country that does not recognize you, that does not recognize you as human. And like, one, boy, Japan. Two, boy, United States, huh? Like really, it feels really loaded there. But like, ultimately it's a story about war, about like who gets to be remembered, who gets a grave, and who lives only in memory, right? All of the people who are like, they're called the 86 because they were sentenced to the 86th district, and the districts are like numbered, right? And I think like it handles all that fairly well, right?
I thought it was called 86 because to 86 something needs to get rid of it.
It's very possible that that's the sort of like intention of it, right?
Yeah, I mean that is like more like American English kind of thing. But
maybe
they're aware of it.
So it's very good. It looks very good. And it's very well directed. Like all of the mech fights look really great. Like they're very well composited.
Cool.
But the thing is, and this is not necessarily a complaint, but this is it's very much an example of a story that is told, and it's for a specific reason. But like, this is an example of a story that is told about oppressed people, but tells it from the perspective of the oppressors, right? Like, the kind of like Pocahontas, not the Pocahontas, but like, I guess like the Avatar, right? Like James Cameron's Avatar, where like, this is a story about the native people of this land, but it's told from the perspective of a guy who is not native to this land, right? And it's about him like learning to be a better person and like recognizing the like humanity of the native people, but still, right? Like, this is like, it's just very like a very classic story of a very classic case of like telling a story about the oppressed from the point of view of the oppressor, and like having the oppressor learn like a lesson or whatever, right?
Right.
But also, I mean, spoiler warning, but all the 86 characters die at the end, and
God.
yeah,
no.
basically the twist is that they learned that the group that the main character is handling, and I don't remember her name, sorry, is basically a death unit, right? What happens is they are literally trying to commit genocide on the 86 by having them fight in these death robots, but they give them the promise, if you fight for 5 years, your service is over and you can return home. They don't get to return home. They go on one last quote-unquote scouting mission into the neighboring kingdom where all the robots are, and they don't get supplies. So they're literally just sent out there to die.
Wait, but why?
Because they want to commit genocide, but they want to do it without telling anybody.
Wait, why do they want to do that? I don't get it.
I mean, realistically, like, for the same reasons that, like, people want to commit genocide in real life, right? Like, there's not really a reason. It's just kind of like a bias that they have.
I guess because of, like, the quote-unquote racial differences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very much a case of creating an ethno-state, right? Of creating a state of only your pure race, right? And this is like what it looks like when it succeeds.
Wow, that's,
and at the
oh
end,
my god, that's
and it's
crazy.
it's super dark, and at the very end, like after you've gone through the trouble of like learning about the trauma of the characters and like seeing them like grow and even learn to trust the handler, whose name I can't remember, then they just go off and die.
Yeah.
And like this is one of those things where like it doesn't feel like oh, it's a shock value thing. No, like that's the point. It's a war story, right?
Oh man.
And it's very depressing. Like I'll say this outright. It's a very depressing watch.
I'm upset, and I'm only hearing about it. I didn't even I only experienced the first episode.
And there's like a lot of exploration of like, you know, what it means, right? Because she goes to see her uncle, and she's just like asking him like what the fuck is up with this country? What's wrong with this country? Like why does this keep happening? And he's just like, it's just the way it is, and I cannot change it. Like, if you want to stop fighting for this country because it is corrupt and bad, then you are free to do it. Like, you know what the stripes on our flag represent? They represent freedom and equality and like all this crap. And do you think this country is doing any of those things right now? Right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, no. No, I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
Not feeling very patriotic right now, sir.
Right. I will say, like, the directing of this anime also is good. I think anime direction has gotten a lot better in recent years. Like, I've noticed a lot more, and maybe it's just I'm more aware of it, but like, there's a lot of like little things that happen that I'm like, oh, that's a very cool trick. One of my favorite scenes or pair of scenes in the anime is so when the 86 die, the Undertaker, the sort of head of Operation Spearhead, which is like the operation that the Handler is in charge of, it's the very front of the war line. It's like the front, right? When one of the pilots dies, he goes and shoots them in the head so that the brain will not be harvestable by the like AI machines. So he essentially has to like kill them with his own hands, right? And the probably my favorite scene is when he does this for the first time with her listening, and he's like explaining this, and then you see I think the bullet casing fly, but you do not hear the sound. It is not until a scene later in the episode where you see her side of that scene, and hear the sound, but you don't see it. And that's such an amazing directing choice. Like, it's so impactful. It just, bam, it really hits you. It's so effective, and it's so good. Overall, like, the direction in this show is, like, very good. It's very sharp. We get to see most of the scenes from both perspectives, from the perspective of the people on the front line and, like, their firsthand experience, and then from the perspective of the handler who is so far removed from it. And, like, this scene, like, this show is not subtle about its, like, about how it feels about these things. Literally, there is a very, like, sardonic line about how people are taken off of the handler role because sometimes too many of the 86 die, which is too much for the handler to handle. Literally, the deaths of like enough people is so traumatizing to these people they cannot continue working as, like, quote unquote drone operators, right? And
yeah, but they killed all of them at the end.
Right. And like, what's very interesting to me is that is not the end of the story.
Yeah.
Apparently,
how do they keep going?
Well, apparently there is another season coming in the fall, and I'm really interested to see what they do with that. And it makes a lot of sense all of a sudden, given that, why the main character was the handler. And
it's gonna be a revolution.
Yeah, right. Like one would hope that season 2 is just her, like, going around wrecking shit. Right.
I think that's what everyone would want after that.
just starting a reckoning. But, like, yeah, it is a very, like, you know, straightforward, like, story about about war, right? Even beyond all of the racism and discrimination stuff, right? All the internment stuff. It is a story about how the people who live in a society at war do not necessarily bear the brunt of those consequences, and the less they feel the consequences, the less they actually really care, right? Like, most of the characters, or, like, most of the civilians just don't really care. It's autonomous robots fighting for all they know, right? Even though, like, a mass internment happened a couple of years ago, but soon, like, because they're covering it up, it'll just fade from memory. It doesn't exist, right? And it's, like, a very, like, kind of real thing. Like, it's a very, like, Full Metal Alchemist-y kind of thing to just have your entire country be built on the back of this sort of racial exploitation. But that's, like, kind of the story of a lot of countries in the world, Japan included.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I found all that to be very interesting. I thought the show was very good overall. I was engaged all the way through, I gotta say.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, what is with the season and these, like, heartbreaking shows?
Oh man, it's I don't know. People are just discontent with the government, I guess. I mean, if I lived in Japan too, I would be very discontent with the government. Coronavirus, not enough vaccines. Well, let's have the Olympics anyway.
More war anime.
Yeah. So,
right.
yeah, that's how I felt about 86. Like, really surprisingly good all the way through.
Okay, that's awesome.
All right. Well, why don't you tell me about Mashiro no Oto?
I'll tell you about Mashiro no Oto, which is the shamisen anime, and let me tell you, the music is just so good the entire way through, which is exactly what you would want from a show like this. They go through, and of course they explain, like, the subtleties. You learn more about the shamisen and also about the playing, like, what is special about it, what is, like, they even give, like, examples of, like, lackluster performances, so you can kind of, like, hear the difference, essentially. And I think it tells, like, a really nice story for the main character and his, I guess, like, relationship with his grandfather, and how much he struggles with not only the grief of losing his grandfather, but also living in his grandfather's shadow and trying to keep his music alive, but also try and form his own identity and figure out why his grandfather told him to quit the shamisen. And it really comes to a head at the end. Spoiler. When you find out that his mom, who came in relatively early into the anime to kind of like kick her son's butt and start providing for him while he's living in the big city and push him forward, you find out that her motivation to do so was because she wants him to continue living in his grandfather's shadow and to keep playing just like his grandfather, because the grandfather,
okay, I see.
Yeah, was a genius, and not enough people in like even knew who the man was because he was so private about his playing. He never wanted to enter any tournaments or like, you know, those kind of like really public showings or whatever. He just wanted to play at home. And as a result, not nearly enough people in her mind got to experience his playing. So basically this mom holds like a whole shamisen tournament, and she names it after the grandfather. And her intention on basically strong-arming her son into joining it was so that he would play like the grandfather and show the world what the grandfather sounded like. And she gets pissed because turns out along the way that her son made friends, and those friends started encouraging him to play in his own style. They form, you know, a strong bond with him, and that influences his style too, and it like inspires him and motivates him to produce his own unique sound. And she hates that. And she basically emotionally manipulates her son into playing like his grandfather during the individual part of the tournament where they're playing solos.
Mm-hmm.
And but halfway through, thankfully, he rallies around and realizes that he should play like himself, because he starts to understand that what his grandfather meant by telling him to quit the shamisen is that until he can learn to play his own sound, then he shouldn't try and play the shamisen at all. Like he wants his grandson to chase after his sound by producing his own sound, like, you know, that kind of feeling. But oh my god, the part with the mom was like so hard to handle, because she basically guilt tripped him into playing like the grandfather by basically saying like, do you want your grandfather's memory to be forgotten?
Oof.
Do you want that on you?
Oof.
And I was like, I hate this woman. Because at first you really like her because she's like, oh, she's cool. She's trying to motivate the main character, and then by the end you're like, this woman is evil. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think he ends up in third place because the judges mark him down because he switched styles in the middle of his performance. But by the end, he gets motivated to enter more tournaments and to compete, which is something that he's never done before. And he also is more motivated to kind of produce his own sound, but at the same time, you know that his mother is still around and that there are other people around who are now interested in hearing the grandfather sound now that he has played like him in public. So, a lot of drama. But the series overall was really compelling. I liked it a lot. Nice, soft show about shamisen, occasional infuriating drama. We don't get any resolution with the mom because it is based on a manga. So, and the manga I think is still ongoing. But it leaves off, I think, after the tournament wraps up. So it's kind of like a nice spot to just end it, and then I hope they make more, because we get to hear lots of really cool shamisen music.
Yeah, I'm sad I didn't get to watch more of it, actually. I was really excited. I just didn't have time.
I know. I will say that it's worth watching the rest of it. It's pretty fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad. I might try to do that sometime. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next two are also stuff that I watched. I'll try to blaze through it because I don't really have a whole lot to say about them.
Sure.
Let's see. Shaman King 2021. It's a remake of the ye old Shaman King. It's so nostalgic watching. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what happened. Oh yeah,
man. Yeah, like it's like Shaman King is one of those like OG series that you were watching on like 4Kids.
Yes. And so you get all the classic tropes, but in a more, I guess, updated, like more HD looking style. But they keep all the proportions and the art style the same as before. So everyone has like huge heads and tiny bodies. Of course.
Yeah.
And I love it. And it's great. And really sharp angles for all of their clothing. It's perfect. And yeah, no, it's if you liked the original Shaman King, you'll definitely like the remake. I didn't watch them back to back, so I don't have any like, hard comparisons to say like, oh, this part was better than that part. But as someone who watched the old Shaman King back when it was airing on American television, and I'm watching the remake now, I'm still really enjoying it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think that one's in Netflix jail, so yeah. Maybe I'll watch it someday. I don't remember shit about Shaman King.
I know. I was watching it and I was like, wow, I'm surprised by how little I remembered about it. But it all came back as soon as the moments hit. I was like, oh yeah, that did happen. That kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's fun. Highly recommend if you just want some more Shaman King in your life. And lastly, I watched half of Bishonen Tanteidan.
Yeah, we watched like 4 or 5 episodes together, right?
Yeah, I think I only watched like maybe 1 or 2 more episodes after that. But yeah, it continues to be super, super gorgeous, like really, really visually stunning. Yeah.
That's what I noticed when we watched it, which was it was always just consistently very, very pretty.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the level of quality that they're able to keep up. Like you can kind of see in certain episodes where they take a step back, but they still manage to produce really pretty shots regardless. And I would say, like, for me, I'm not vibing as much with the story. It feels like if Oran High School Host Club and Hyoka were to try and get merged together, but unsuccessfully. So the cast isn't as, like, compelling or to me as interesting as the Oran boys plus Haruhi. And the mysteries aren't as interestingly told as in Hyoka. So yeah. It just kind of like the story and writing just feel a bit lackluster to me, considering how impressive the visuals are. I would say that if you're the type of person who really appreciates visuals and you don't necessarily need like a strong story, then you'd probably get a lot of enjoyment out of this. But I take a strong like stance especially when it comes to like mystery stories, like that it ought to be told like well, and I ought to feel compelled as the characters discover and walk through the mystery. And I just don't really have a whole lot of investment in terms of what is being presented to me with this show, unfortunately. That being said, I haven't finished it, so maybe it like really ramps up in the second half of the show. Who's to say? Yeah, but at the point where I'm at, I became a little bit bored with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, so. That's kind of where I'm at with it too. I think it was kind of interesting, but it didn't. It started very interesting, but I think it didn't really go anywhere that captured me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it feels like it kind of meandered in a way that wasn't, in a way that I didn't want necessarily.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with that one too. So
sure, yeah, kind of me too, honestly. Like visually looks amazing.
Oh yeah.
It has a lot of style, it has a lot of flair. And for some people, I imagine that might be enough to get you through the show, honestly. Like, I bet.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be mad to watch it just for that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because it is so visually it's like visually spectacular, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like Studio Shaft doing what they do.
It is a lot of what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us up. Shockingly,
Wow.
there's so many other things that I wish I could speak on. Like, I really wanted to watch more of Vivi.
Oh yeah, me too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to watch more of Mashiro no Oto, but
Yeah.
obviously I didn't get the chance. And given if this is like the pace of anime now, I just don't know if I'll ever be able to do it. Oh God.
I think maybe next season it looks like there's a little less that we're super interested
I think this season is at the very least like weirdly abnormal. So
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, I think that'll actually do it for us.
Yeah.
So why don't we wrap up? Who are you and where can we find you on the internet?
Hello. I am Swan, also known as Renu. You can find me on Twitch, on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, all that at Swandron. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I am so close to finishing Judgment. I think like maybe 1 to 2 more play sessions and we'll be donesies for realsies. I think they just popped up like my last like splurge of side quests before I guess we get railroaded into the finale. Ooh. So I'll probably be doing that this Friday.
Nice.
Yeah. You can check in on me. You can check in on my puppo Clover at those places.
Very nice.
Yeah. How about you?
You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. I have been up to a lot of streaming recently. I've been streaming Final Fantasy XIV. For one of them, I've been making my way through Yakuza Kiwami 2. That's been super fun. Some of the side quests in Yakuza Kiwami 2 are pretty wild. Like I did the one where the guy has the baby fetish.
Oh no.
Yeah. I did that one. I did the fake Kiryu one.
Yes,
the great one.
Yes.
And then I just sat there for like what was in game probably like 40 hours just watching movies.
Yeah, I did that too. I had a part of a stream where I just watched all the movies.
You just watched all the movies. Yeah. Well, like when you watch the Yakuza Heartbreak one and it's basically like the parody of like of Kiryu and Nishikiyama.
Yeah, it is.
In Zero, you're like, oh, my heart. And then like when you go and do karaoke and you do the one where it's like you get the flashbacks from like Nishikiyama and you doing Judgment together. It's like, oh my heart. Oh, my heart can't take this. Yeah, Yakuza Kiwami 2 has been interesting. I spent like 2 hours trying to learn how to play Mahjong and I didn't even learn shit.
You and I gotta play it together.
I learned that Mahjong is basically just Giga Poker.
Yes.
But there's like really complicated things like the 13 orphans. What the fuck? Bro, what?
I'm still learning Mahjong, so yes, I
think learning Mahjong is like a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
Like
I have someone in my stream called the Mahjong Medic who has been helping me get through some of the Mahjong challenges in Judgment, because it's in Judgment as well.
Oh my god.
They have like a whole like friendship that you're supposed to get through Mahjong in Judgment.
Before I read that 19 pages of instruction.
Oh, you read through all?
I read through every single page, and I still didn't really understand how to play it. But like literally, I read that entire handbook, and I had never known anything about Mahjong before then. Oh my god, Jesus Christ!
It is a complicated game.
Yeah, that game is wild. Like, It's like if poker was made of chess. Anyway, other than that, like, also we obviously do our Ace Attorney stream every Saturday.
Yay!
But, other than that, I have been going through Kiwami 2 and the story. Been taking quite the interest in obviously the fact that the main sort of plot of Kiwami 2 revolves around the Korean mafia. I believe that the title of my last stream was, boy, I sure can't wait to have a nuanced and sensitive portrayal of Korean characters in a Japanese video game.
About as nuanced as their portrayals of Chinese people, I'll say that.
oh yeah, for sure. Yep. That's all there really is to say about that one.
Yes.
Yeah. Other than that, like, I'm around on Twitter and stuff. Yeah, that's kind of all I'm up to.
Cool.
Our opening is by Scott T Network and our ending is by Takuma Okada. And the patrons we're thanking this week are Evan Williams, Frostfall, Cherubel, Sean Dow, Magpie Minitas, Claire, Undead Uncanny, and Dylan Boats. Thank you so much for your support.
Man, thank you guys so much.
Time and again, it warms my heart that you give us money to continue to subscribe to all of these questionable anime streaming sites.
Hey, you said that Crunchyroll's player got better.
Oh yeah, the Crunchyroll player, the new player is really good actually. It's like, honestly, I'm impressed. I really wish Funimation would do vaguely anything. Like I wish their player worked. Period.
When you were complimenting Crunchyroll's player, I was like, wow, this feels so strange hearing Soupy compliment a player on anime.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know what happened. Crunchyroll's player got worse for a little bit, and then it got better all of a sudden.
Well, that's great.
Sometimes I will never understand why it's so hard to not fuck up. Like, here's the thing. I think it is hard to make a good video streaming platform.
Sure, yeah, of course.
I don't think it's that hard to not fuck it up if yours is fine.
To regress.
Like, that's what I truly did not understand about the Crunchyroll player.
I didn't understand it either.
It seemed to have gotten worse. Like, it was bad when it was like Flash, and then they switched over to HTML5, and then suddenly it worked again, and then they made it worse after that for no reason.
They did.
Anyway, complaints aside, yeah. Thank you so much. Patrons, that's right, that's what we were doing. Not complaining about video streaming. Thank you so much for keeping the podcast rolling. You keep our AT fields intact.
Whoa!
Our psychological well-being intact.
Wow!
Yeah. And I think that wraps up for this episode. We'll see you next month when we talk about well, hopefully we talk about the thing that we had planned, but really we might just end up having to do the sampler episode then. And maybe we'll have to restructure how we do these, because honestly we could just get away with only doing a wrap-up episode and then just having the trailer watch be our like sampler. But that's a conversation to have another time. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.
See you next time.
さようなら。また明日ね。